What if the most dangerous thing about Goodfellas wasn't the guys on screen, but the choices behind the camera? The money in Jimmy's hand that wasn't movie money, the dinner that wasn't prop food, the scene that wasn't exactly scripted, just detonated. And the early audiences who got so riled up the studio thought they had a disaster on their hands. By the end, you'll see why Goodfellas doesn't just tell the story of a gangster. It traps you inside the heartbeat of one, and the way they pulled that off is wilder than most fans realize. But that wasn't the whole story. The book that almost didn't become a movie. Nicholas Pileggi's non-fiction wise guy gave Scorsese everything he needed: grit, detail, and a point of view that refused to apologize. But the path from page to screen wasn't a coronation, it was a tug of war. Early on, studios wanted a cleaner hero and a neat moral bow. Scorsese wanted the truth, even if it meant no one was redeemed. Casting wasn't simple either. Names like Tom Cruise were floated for Henry Hill, and Madonna's name even entered the chat for Karen. That's how big the conversation got, before Scorsese dug his heels in for Ray Liotta and Lorraine Bracco. When Ray finally got the call, he broke down. This wasn't just a role, it was permission to tell a story the dangerous way. And what happened next would shock everyone. Authenticity that cuts. Literally. The reputation is true. Scorsese is obsessive about texture, but Goodfellas pushed that obsession into myth. The cash Robert De Niro handles, not prop bills. The prop master actually withdrew several $1,000s, and when Marty yelled cut, everyone froze until every last bill was counted. That's not a vibe, that's procedure, and it's why the gestures feel lived in. Jimmy Conway doesn't just have money, he handles it. Same with the food. Those Sunday table scenes feel cozy for a reason. Catherine Scorsese, Marty's mother, actually cooked for them. The sauce you see simmering through Henry's worst day, real. The steam, the smell, the temptation for extras to accidentally sneak a taste, also real. It turned the set into a home where danger just happened to be a constant guest. But the sound of this world mattered just as much as its taste. Scorsese had songs in his head years before cameras rolled. He wasn't slapping needle drops on in post. He was building scenes around music, timing cuts to beats he'd already picked. That's why the soundtrack doesn't sit on top of the movie. It pulls you through it. And still, none of that prepared the set for what Joe Pesci was about to do. When improv becomes a weapon. Funny how was not a normal line reading. It was an ambush disguised as a joke. Pesci brought in a real memory, telling a wise guy he was funny, watching the room turn cold, and realizing there was no safe exit. Scorsese turned that into a live grenade. Pesci and Liotta got the plan, others didn't. What you're seeing is fear that hasn't been briefed. The nervous laughs, the darting eyes. That's the set processing a possible explosion. The scene was first improvised, then tightened in the cut. But the electricity you feel is the moment unpredictability became a character. And it wasn't a one-off. Marty would whisper different directions to different actors. Dialogue changed, take to take. Blocking morphed. The script supervisor tried to catch a hurricane with a clipboard. That's why the movie hums. There's constant micro-surprise in the performances, so your brain never settles. But surprise alone doesn't make a classic. Precision does. And nowhere is that clearer than the night Henry walks into the Copacabana. The shot that put you in Henry's skin. 3 minutes, no cuts. A walk from the street, through the kitchen, to a front row table like the world just parts for you. The Copacabana shot isn't a flex, it's character psychology. The Steadicam operator Larry McConkey and DP Michael Ballhaus turned a logistical nightmare into a smooth high, adjusting timing, choreography, even tiny interactions to stitch exterior kitchen and club into one continuous ascent. It was in the can by lunch, but only after meticulous rehearsal and on-the-fly creativity that solved light, space, and movement problems shot by shot. That's why it feels effortless. All the effort went into erasing the seams. And then the movie yanks the floor. Because when Henry starts to spiral, the cutting rhythm starts to race. The edits jab, the audio jumps forward, and a helicopter blade becomes a metronome for panic. It's not chaos, it's design. Schoonmaker's cutting sinks to Henry's fried attention span, so you live inside his last free day whether you want to or not. But craft wasn't the only reality pressing in on this set. Real people, real pressure. Plenty of productions hire consultants. Goodfellas had something stranger, people who just showed up, extras with histories, visitors with notes about pinky rings, tie knots, and how cash travels up a chain. It was a blur of law enforcement advisors one day and nod and smile, friends of the program the next. That porous border between Hollywood and the world it was portraying sharpened everything. Gestures, posture, even the way cigarettes got held. And while urban legend says De Niro phoned Jimmy Burke himself from prison, what's solid is this. De Niro called Henry Hill repeatedly for granular details, how Burke walked, flicked ash, counted money, until Jimmy Conway's mannerisms felt eerily specific. That specificity made the violence feel uncomfortably normal, which is exactly why the first audiences didn't react the way the studio hoped. But the backlash came fast, the preview that made Warner Brothers sweat. At early test screenings, people didn't just fidget, they left. By the time Spider gets popped, anger in the room spiked. One audience in Orange County had dozens of walkouts. Comment cards got ugly, marketing panicked, even release plans tightened because suddenly this didn't look like a crowd pleaser, it looked like a problem. But then the reviews hit like cavalry, and the movie's reputation started to invert. What had scared the room in preview screenings was exactly what critics championed, the refusal to flatter your moral comfort. And yes, the movie swears a lot. The script had fewer F-bombs than you think. The final film lands around 300, much of it born from the improvisational style that let characters talk the way they would in life. That tally isn't trivia, it's texture. It's how you hear the world, not cleaned up, not softened. But the impact of Goodfellas wasn't just audible, it rippled through casting rooms for a decade. The performances that rewired what likable means Ray Liotta didn't play Henry to be forgiven. He played him to be understood. That's more dangerous. He let the thrill live beside the rot, and the movie refuses to tell you how to feel about it. De Niro's menace? Mostly stillness. Micro-expressions do the threatening. Pesci's volatility? A match you can't stop staring at because the flame changes shape every second. Bracco refused to play Karen as a bystander. She's complicit, seduced, and then scorched. The net effect is a cast that doesn't beg you to like them, and that freed up an entire generation of movies and TV to make anti-heroes the center of the frame without apologizing. And the overlap between this film and The Sopranos? Not an accident, and not small. Depending on how you count, dozens of actors, and even crew, crossed over. One tally pegs the broader overlap at around 45 individuals. Another count of on-camera talent alone sits in the high 20s. Either way, the DNA is obvious. Goodfellas didn't just influence The Sopranos, it practically set the table. But if the acting rewired our tastes, the style rewired the tool set. The style that became a toolkit. Freeze frames at shock points aren't just cool. Scorsese uses them to mimic how adrenaline imprints a memory. Voiceover isn't exposition. It's a second narration track where what you hear often betrays what you see. Text on screen, needle drops that comment instead of decorate, a camera that moves like status. These weren't random flourishes, they were deliberate choices keyed to, how does it feel to be Henry right now? It's why so many later films and series felt comfortable turning pop songs into storytelling engines and letting narration become character instead of tour guide. The toolkit spread because the logic behind it was simple and powerful, and yet, for all that design, the production still hinged on fragile, real life. The human costs you don't see. Here's a gut punch. Scorsese has written about a day when Ray Liotta learned his mother was gravely ill and still powered through a crucial scene before racing to her side. That's not myth-making. That's a reminder that this razor-wire movie was built by people carrying private pain. It's part of why Henry's last day feels haunted. The set wasn't just performing intensity, the cast was living through their own. Even Paul Sorvino, the calm eye of the storm as Paulie, nearly quit days before filming. He worried he couldn't find the coldness the role required. Then he stared at himself in a mirror and discovered a stillness in his face, eyes that could go dead. Paulie arrived and Sorvino stayed. History pivoted. And if you're wondering whether all this risk paid off beyond awards and quotes, look at the long shadow it casts. Why Goodfellas still feels alive. It's not just that the movie is propulsive or quotable or stacked with career-defining turns. It's that Goodfellas made a radical choice. It refused to flatter us. It let the thrill be thrilling and the ugliness be ugly, often in the same breath. It invited real-world detail into the frame, real cash, real food, real mannerisms, fused music to character the way a heartbeat fuses to a body, and then cut the film to the rhythm of a mind under pressure. That's why you can watch it a dozen times and still feel ambushed. The movie isn't about a lifestyle. It is the sensation of living it. And if you want a single image that captures the whole thing, think of that Copacabana glide, the camera slipping past the rules like they're optional. That's not glamour. It's the beginning of a trap. The bill always comes due. As far back as Henry remembers, he wanted to be a gangster. As far back as cinema remembers, Goodfellas wanted to be something more, proof that mainstream movies could be as dangerously alive as real life. It almost didn't happen. Some actors nearly bailed. Preview audiences fled. The studio flinched. And yet the film found its pulse. A stew of improvisation and obsession, where even the sauce on the stove and the cash in a pocket carry weight. If you've ever felt Goodfellas get under your skin, now you know why. It wasn't made to reassure you. It was made to make you feel the rush, the rot, and the cost. And the next time you watch Jimmy peel off bills or Karen lean into a secret she's not supposed to like, remember, behind those moments is 1,000 tiny decisions to do it the hard way, the real way. That's the difference between a good gangster movie and a film that rewires the culture.